Hey, so we are back. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, to NanMan's Nerd Corner. As always, we're here to talk about all things nerdy, and we've got our wonderful co-host joining us again. Jaime, great to see you. How you been?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me again, and look forward to this and many others.
Yeah, that's what I like to hear. Now, before we dive into this episode, if you saw the title, you should already know. The movie's been out for a month, so you've had a month. If you wanted to see it in theaters, you would have done it by now. But we're going to start the episode and say, big spoiler warning. We're going to talk about Spider-Verse, and we're going to spoil it if you haven't watched it. If you have, then great. Join the discussion. Hang out with us. Listen, see if you guys had the same ideas that we did. We're going to talk about animation. We're going to talk about spoilers. We're going to talk about the comic book. We're going to talk about predictions and thoughts. Maybe we'll get into more MCU stuff. We're gonna see how it feels. It might just be we get sucked into too much of this and then we lose. We don't have any time, and so we'll do another MCU in the future. But we'll see how it goes. It might be a little bit crazy there. But let's start things off. I feel like a good way of starting is the animation for it feels similar to the first one, but also going above and beyond. Like, it felt like each of the characters were unique, each of the environments were unique, but it just did it even better than the first one, I felt like. But I don't know. I think we got to explore more by going to different universes, and we got to see more than just kind of the similar stuff from the first one. But I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about the feel?
Yeah, no. The feel of it was amazing. I mean, you're coming off of the first film, which was kind of a interesting and awesome modern take, honestly, with like modern art styles and all the different types of styles that we saw when we were watching that. And then you came in, and it almost felt a little bit enhanced with Across the Spider-Verse. What I found very interesting is just the amount of like effort and detail that went into individual characters and make them feel like they stand out a little bit more. So the different styles of the characters and giving them a little bit more life amongst all the Spider-Man and everyone that was, you see in what was it they called the the place where they were all at. But essentially, there was something I had read as well prior to seeing the movie. Because I was trying to really avoid as much of the spoilers as I could. I didn't see it until a little bit later, where they were saying it took them about 4 years to animate the entire chase scene with all the Spider-Man trying to catch.
I think I saw something that was like there was 180 unique spider people in that building during that chase scene that they had to animate each individual one. So yeah, that's 4 years makes a lot of sense when you put that into perspective of trying to make them all look and feel unique and not just like copy and paste Spider-Man into this like Where's Waldo scene like this.
Yeah, no. So I thought in terms of the art style, I felt like it stayed true to the original, but it just improved it a little bit further. I think everything had definition. They mix a lot of different, animations and art styles together. It worked really well. It flowed really well. It wasn't forced. You could tell that there was a lot of effort put into how cohesive everything was. So it felt like you were adding a bunch of different art masterpieces together, but they fit really well because there was a lot of thought put into it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it wasn't just adding things to add things. It definitely felt like it was connected and meaningful in how they went about it. So I've been really pumped to do this episode because I am a big art nerd, and in the sense that I very much appreciate art, and I have art books and comic books and all these things that I've collected. I was like, I love looking at pictures. And so like I've nerded out looking into stuff about some of the animation stuff that went into it. So I've got two, I have a couple of them, but I have a couple of cool facts that I've found in my research. So one of which is the webbing that they use in their animation changed from this movie compared to the first one, specifically because there was a Netflix movie that came out called The Sea Beast. Now, if you haven't seen The Sea Beast, It's very good. It's if you have kids, watch it with the kids. They'll love it. It's one of those How to Train Your Dragon style stories where you go, oh, there's monsters and we're going to befriend the monsters, and that old story. It's just like that. There's these people hunting sea monsters, so they had developed specific animation for rigging and roping on these giant boats to hunt sea monsters, and so that method that they use, the people that worked on Spider-Verse took that method and used it when they developed all the webbing of all the spider people in this. So I was like, that is super cool. I love that little animation is getting better from all the people around you and going, that's awesome, let's steal that and do that in our stuff. And so like that, I thought that was one really cool thing that I noticed. Another thing is the Lego animated scenes that were in this. Do you know this one? I see Jaime nodding along.
Yep. Go ahead. Go. This is your run. I know this one. Yep.
This is this one. I was like, that's so cool. So the Lego scenes were done by a 14-year-old kid. So like there's like a whole New York Times article and stuff written about him. But from the stuff that I saw was that he worked on did some Lego scenes from the original Spider-Verse. They liked it and they were like, hey, you want a job? You want to do some Lego stuff for this one? So like that, I think that's awesome. So those are two starting ones that I got. I got a couple more in there, but what do you think about those stuff so far?
So it's funny because my fiance actually, I wasn't aware of this until my fiance found this video and she sent it to me, and they were interviewing one of the main producers and or animators of the film, and he talked about that scene where they hired the kid to do the animation again, and they also were talking about how they thought it would be funny, and there's a particular scene where Miguel tells Peter, you're one of our best, right?
Oh,
and
yes.
Miguel is like this stoic, doesn't compliment anyone, they thought it would be really funny that they would be a comment about, hey, you're like the best Spider-Man to the Lego Spider-Man.
To the Lego version of it. You're one of our best. I love that.
You're one of our best.
No,
but yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's good. So like there's those things. Spider-Punk is in here, which everyone I feel like became obsessed with after they've seen it. At least within the circles of the internet, the nerdy portions that I frequent the most, people have been obsessed with him. And so I saw some of the initial testing stuff that they did about his outfit shifting and changing so much that the directors loved it. Everybody was really happy about it. One cool thing with it is that. With the actual movie and all the scenes, not just like the test stuff they did, but in the actual movie, they animated that his body, his guitar, and his outline are all set and animated at different timings.
Yep.
So like everything feels almost disjointed and disconnected, but flows really well and actually fits, even though it's shifting and changing and disjointed because of his character and what like. So I was like. Again, we talked about the feel of the movie, and everybody has their own unique feel, and making each of the Spider-Verse people feel unique is what makes it so good, right? You looked at the first one, you go, the art style just for each character is unique, and they blended it so perfectly, and even this, they've stepped it up even more for like Spider-Punk and stuff like that. So I was big fan of that. Seeing that shift of like his clothes are changing, everything's shifting and changing. But I don't know, what were your thoughts on Spider-Punk? Like, were you as obsessed with him as like everybody else was?
Yeah, I loved his entire design. I'm gonna confess that I didn't know much about a couple of the different characters that showed up. I had to do a little bit of research after the fact. Spider-Punk was one of those characters, and it was, I think, what I really liked about his animation style and the different synchronizations of like the three different animation styles within his character really kind of talked about his character in general as well, right? So he's like the rebel, like he's helping, but he's doing it kind of his way, and he had such a big part in the movie of like, hey, don't do, like the one scene where he's talking to Miles and Miles gets trapped, right? And he's like, don't forget, use your hands, like
just the fingertips.
Yeah. And he leaves the watch for Gwen. So his character was just so cool in that sense too, that like he was a good guy, but he was like he was playing by his own what he felt was right. Like kind of, I don't know. For me, that was kind of the spirit of what Spider-Man represents. You know, you do the right thing and
despite everything else. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I think he knew there was something wrong with this, and he was kind of going along with it, but he really wasn't. He was doing his own thing, and that shows in his character and how the story develops.
Right.
So yeah, Spider-Punk, love him.
Yeah. Right.
Can't wait to see more of him, and I hope that he gets even more.
I was like, I'm hoping that
he
I feel like he will in the third one, and even be like almost more mentory, similar to how like you know, Peter B. Parker was to Miles in the first one. I'm hoping that, you know, we're seeing that Spider-Punk's taking that role in the third. Like you said, he was helping out and like, hey, use your hands, not your fingertips, that stuff. He was breaking all those pieces inside there that he used to make the watch for them so they could jump to the different, like he was already guiding and being a mentor essentially to them in this, but like I'd love to see him continue that in his own unique way of just like that he does. I don't know. I liked it. I'm a big fan of the Spider-Punk stuff. So we've got, let's see, Gwen's stuff is really interesting because this, which, you know, maybe we'll save it and talk a little bit about India's Spider-Man, right? The Mumbai or Mumbattan, the combination of Mumbai and Manhattan.
Yeah,
that was. So like, you know, his character is super cool. Like, you know, the uniqueness of his stuff, like the little funny aspect of the chai tea or whatever. He's like, chai means tea, things like that. I did see an interview with the actor that played the India Spider-Man, was like, you know, I got to go in and sit with them and talk with them about the character and kind of brainstorm, and you know, that basically that bit about chai tea and stuff was stuff that, you know, we brainstormed up and we thought up when we were working on developing the character and stuff. So I thought that was super cool. And just like that universe is such a unique one too, of just how much depth it has, and like everywhere else is like the art style of it and the line work and you know, felt very differently, where this is a massive place. It kind of in my brain reminded me of what Ravnica looks like for all you magic nerds out there, which is like basically a plane or a planet that's in just a city. And that's kind of what this one felt like, with just like, it just keeps going and going and going, like how deep it goes, instead of like vertically where we're used to with like, you know, the futuristic city, all these tall towers and stuff like this, where it's like, no, it just keeps going down. And so I thought that was pretty cool with the India stuff, but without getting too much into the like the spoilers and the story yet for what happens, because it's a big part of the story. But what did you think about the animation style or the art style with the Mumbattan over there?
Yeah, so I again, kind of similar. I really enjoyed it. It was a very pleasant and good surprise and good twist. You know, so for everyone who's listening, I actually went to see the movie with my fiance, and she, throughout the years, has more or less become a fan of certain things, Marvel and movies and stuff. So some of it I've dragged her out to, some of it she's come of her own free will because she wanted to see the story and such. She really enjoyed it. Is not a non-hardcore fan of comics and all that relating to superheroes and things of that nature. For her, it was really cool. It was really unique. It was different. It was something that kind of we weren't expecting, but it was a very good and pleasant surprise. You know, it was good to see the city that everyone knows in a unique twist.
Yeah.
I thought his design was really awesome. I thought his character was really cool. I liked kind of his like perky, you know, upbeat approach, and just kind of like just says it as is. You know, I really. It was like a good way to break some tension at times, in a very unique and interesting way of like creating that tension. So he makes a comment about, you know, Gwen and him, he must be in love with you, you know, making everything awkward.
Yeah.
But like addressing something that is on everyone's mind, and two characters that essentially have feelings for one another, or you could tell that they have feelings for one another.
Yeah.
So loved the design, loved the city, loved the. I also really enjoyed how his world and his city played into the overall storyline. Again, we'll talk about the spoilers and everything later, but I thought that was such a cool and good way or good direction to take the movie in. Of, hey, we're here now. What's happening here? And then for that big event to happen there, and then as we'll talk about it here in a little bit, two things that potentially change the entire outcome of the entire movie, right? One major event happening, and then the other that wasn't supposed to happen and does.
Yep.
And again, I have to give it to the animators for really grabbing so many different styles and making it flow so well. Like Spider-Punk, going back to Spider-Punk, stood out, but he belonged. He was there.
Yes.
He was part of it. It wasn't forced. It wasn't trying too hard. It was very natural, and you're like, he stands out, but in such a good way.
Right.
And I think this did the same thing. It stood out, but it was just part of everything else. It didn't feel like it was too much, and it didn't feel like it was trying too hard.
One other little Spider-Man India thing is just a little subtle thing is that all the action words, like the thwips and the punches and stuff like that, are all animated in Hindi. So even the words and stuff like that, they like really were like, yep, we're going all in. Everything is going to be matching up. So like there's like all these little details that I'm just like nerding out about because it's just like super cool stuff that they did when they were animating it. But which leads me into kind of our last animation related talk before we get into the story, because I figured this would be the good one to end on for animation stuff, is Gwen, because you know, it's the perfect flow into the actual story of Spider-Verse. But Gwen stuff is really cool. I really liked her world because of how kind of almost like blurry and watercolory it was. And you know, her world is the colors in it are dictated by moods. It's almost like a mood ring environment, and like the colors are very contrasting and different, you know, like lot more of the kind of purples and things like that around Gwen, with her kind of dealing with what she's dealing with. You know, one of the most striking things is like, you know, her versus her dad, and her dad's very orange around him and red and like yellow, like these brighter colors, and where she's very kind of muted in purples and pinks and blue, you know, like these different feels to them that you know, even it's kind of blurry watercolor background, it still had so much that they were able to tell from her world compared to each individual world that we got to visit and stuff.
Yeah, and I think to add to that too, they did a good job of, I felt like the watercoloring and the style of art was kind of a good portrayal of how the character was feeling and the internal struggle. You know, the fact that it almost felt like ink blotty, kind of like, you know, it had colors and it had things, so they had shape, but they were distorted. And I think that kind of played to her character of how she was feeling. She was feeling out of place. She was feeling distorted. And even in the exchange between her and her father, they do such a good job of, like you said, the colors are still like, they're portraying how they're feeling, but they're still very distorted, giving that feeling of, this is what you're feeling at this moment in time, but often, more times than not, what you feel at that moment isn't how you end up feeling overall. And we see that later in the story when Gwen goes back, that, you know, her dad had a choice. He was feeling how he was at that certain time, but he made the choice the same way that she made her choice to go on and join the group. So I thought that they did, again, magnificent job. I thought it was cool to have the movie kind of start there.
Yes,
honestly.
And right, exactly, right. It definitely felt more like Gwen's story this time around by picking it up directly from her point of view in that regard of, okay, we're drumming, we're going through it, and so it felt very cool to see that progression and kind of follow along. Even though we would jump around, we'd see, you know, what's Miles up to, but it definitely felt more from Gwen's point of view from the beginning of like, okay, we're going through it, and here's the drumming stuff. We're seeing flashes of images and stuff. So like, I don't know, I felt really good. Now, one interesting discussion related to Gwen's stuff before we jump into the actual story of the movie itself. They have a lot of subtle things, the animators have done throughout it, and one of the things was in Gwen's room, there's a poster, Trans Lives Matter, up above her door and stuff like that, which, as people get butthurt about things, there was lots of discussion. Apparently, Spider-Verse was removed from some cinemas in a dozen Muslim-related, majority countries because of this transgender-related poster or something like that. I think it's dumb. I think people, if it's 2023, people, come on now. Trans lives matter, right? But there shouldn't be any reason not to go watch a movie just because there's a poster in it that if you blink, you missed it. Like, people are dumb.
Well, I didn't know where we were gonna take the discussion, because I know this can be kind of a sensitive subject, and there's individuals everywhere that have very strong and different opinions about everything. So my comment here is, I've read a bunch of stuff too where the community was talking about Gwen potentially being transgender.
I did see some of that, yeah.
And there was a lot of things, essentially going back and forth, and it felt like, I think that was like a subtle way of the animators to kind of show that Gwen's an ally.
Yeah.
With the poster, with the different colors, and the world itself was like, hey, she is an ally. This world, and how she sees things, that is a part of it. It is sad to see that parts of the world are essentially closed-minded, in the sense that, like, you're taking away from the general story and the good that it can do. I think the last thing I wanted to mention here is, I walked away from the movie feeling like they did a magnificent job of including and inclusion in general.
Yes.
In so many different ways. And what I really, really, so like, this is going to make me sound dumb right now, but the Gwen's mentor, she stood out from the very beginning for me, because it was, here's this badass spider person who is pregnant.
Yes.
And the first message you get right at the beginning is, you can be a badass and you can be a mom. And it was like, holy hell. And then you kept going through the different movie. We got Mumba Hatton. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong.
It's right.
It's
the combination of Mumbai and Manhattan. So Mumbai, Hatton. I don't know. Yeah, well, you get it.
Anyone who's listening, please don't destroy me for.
We're trying, guys.
We're trying. I just felt that the movie did such a good job of just showing inclusion without it being forced. It was natural, and I think the overall message was so good of like, hey, everything just flows. It can flow. It should flow. Like, it can all be one thing. We focus so much about the differences, but this movie did such a magnificent job of bringing it all together, showcasing a bunch of different things, and just making it fit so well together, where that's how reality should be. You shouldn't notice it because it's
just
not
normal,
as big of a,
right?
It's
one of those like, representation matters, and if it's just like normal being in there, that it's not something that they're hitting you over the head, but it's enough for the people that it matters to notice it, and it's a big deal to them. So it's like they did a great job with it. So that's kind of their animation talk / other talk that we kind of threw in here. But let's get into the story itself. So again, big spoilers. The beginning half, we tried to keep it a little bit less spoiler free, just to give you a chance, guys. But now, no excuses.
The gloves are off. I can't hold it any longer. I've done the best I can.
Cliffhanger, like that's the number one. I just like I was not ready for the cliffhanger. I was just like I was getting so hyped up. And it's because I was so invested, and I was like, all right, what are they going to do? How are they going to wrap this up? Like, there's not enough time. No way. And then it was just like, bam. Guess what? We're coming back. you don't even get to find out the end yet. So I was blown away by the shift, like going to Earth 42 and Miles meeting, his alternate reality self, and that whole that was. I was blown away. I was not anticipating it, not expecting it, so I was very, very happy with the ending of it. Well, I don't know. What's your thoughts with the cliffhanger ending, at least?
Yeah, no, it's really funny, man. I had the exact same thought, but my brain went a little bit different. So I had a bottle of water. Mm-hmm. I was really I had lost track of time because I just was so enjoying it into the movie. I was immersed in the world. I was gone. So I'm like, I really, really have to use the restroom. And I'm sitting here like, I could hold out 20, 30 minutes tops.
Yeah.
But how are they gonna end this in 30 minutes? Like, there's just not enough time. And then the cliffhanger happens, and I'm sitting there going, what? Like, it completely caught me off guard.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. We're walking out of the theater, and I see the poster, and underneath, like where it's got the poster art and everything across the Spider-Verse, literally in like small text, it says Part 1. And I'm like, did I not see that because I didn't want to see it, or did I not see that because I'm blind?
I never saw that. I didn't even know that. Interesting.
Yeah, it was and apparently it was in the movie trailer as well. Now that's after I saw it. Whether it was there originally and it wasn't, they just added it later so that people wouldn't get pissed off like all of us were. That could be a different story. But no, I got it, and I know there were a lot of people who were upset by the cliffhanger. I saw a lot of people being like, "How blah blah blah." It's like, but it was supposed to be a trilogy anyways. Right. 2, they did the best they could with the amount of time they had, and I feel that I would much rather go see a Part 1 and a Part 2 of a movie and get a better storyline that didn't feel rushed and was more cohesive than to add an extra half an hour to a movie that might be long, make it longer, and then you rush through the story instead of giving the characters the depth and the time that they need and deserve, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it was already like, 2 hours and 20-some minutes or something like that. So and that's a long animated movie. That's a regular movie that you go to see in the theaters, where like normally when people are thinking animated movie, they're like, this is an hour and a half, right? Quick in, done, get you going. But it was very meaty, had a lot of details, a lot of information to send to you. And like you said, like, it would have sucked to have pushed it an extra 30 minutes just to like rush through the end of the story. So I think breaking it up into a third makes the most sense. I'm very happy with that. So I don't know. So all right, now that we got the big thing, right, the cliffhanger out the way, because that I feel like was, like you said, the shocking part for a lot of people. I know, my wife and I were staring at each other like, what just happened? Why was there a cliffhanger? But so going through it, like, I, very, very happy with how they told the story. Like, it's like a year and some amount of months, 4, 5, 6, whatever they officially, I don't know what the official time passed was between the first movie and this one, but it was cool seeing, like, all right, Miles and Gwen have grown up, they're looking older, it definitely felt like time had passed. They, at least in Miles' case, he knew what he was doing more. Like, they did that whole little like bit of like from the first movie with Spider-Man and being like, oh yeah, I invested all my money and I lost all my money. I did this and I did Miles is like endorsed baby powder, then had to apologize for baby. Like these little like nods and stuff like that I was really happy with them going through that. But I don't know. Let's break down some of the story. What are you thinking here, character wise, the main story? Where do you want to dive in first?
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna start with the villain. I think that's so. Here we have two things to talk about potentially. We have Spot or the Spot,
yep,
and then potentially Miguel.
And
some of the shady stuff that's going on with Miguel. But we'll go back to the supposed main villain before we go off the tinfoil hat theories. I really, really liked his animation style, and I really also liked his character development. I loved how he went from a goofy, like, doesn't know what he's doing to a full-on psychopath. Like, he leveled up pretty fast within the story. Like, it was insane. He was robbing a convenience store to figuring out that he could basically travel the multiverse within himself to being like, hey, I need more dark matter. I'm going to go to another universe and destroy it so I can get more dark matter. So I felt like it was... You have this really funny scene starting out. The movie starts very lighthearted, and then Spot figures out what he can do, and then that story progresses, and it gives the entire movie like a really good villain to fight. Like, that's insane. The fact that he can literally go anywhere, and God knows, I mean, he, from what we saw, he can bring parts of other universes into other universes. So the potential for like infinite possibilities of things happening is infinite. So yeah, what were your thoughts on Spot? I thought his animation progressed through the story as well, man, and I love like how he was really like goofy and like beer gutted belly dude, and then towards the end he's just like dark matter incarnate, just moving around. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
No, I think that's a good way to think about him, right? As he started out as like this kind of goofy guy. Oh, I'm gonna rob this ATM, and he's reaching through and like hitting his hand and like kicking his own butt and like doing these like, oh, I gotta figure this out. And then he becomes this just like world-eating monster, essentially, of absorbing all of this energy and being able to, cause catastrophe across the multiverse. It was very cool, and shout out to the bagel. Causing all of the havocs in all the best movies. We've got this one, and then Everything Everywhere All at Once. Of course, the bagel. Like, I'm loving the bagels, guys. It's great. But no, it's cool to see also characters and villains getting added in that we're not used to seeing, like picking the Spot as their choices here. It was. I think that was already prevalent and cool when we saw the first Spider-Man, when they're like, oh, okay, Liv is Doc Ock in this universe, and like they twist things a bit and stuff, where the Spot is just like, nope, that's the Spot. And in Spider-Man, that's how he is, and they kept him like that, and just like seeing, not only like we're used to seeing the hero's progression, but we're not really used to seeing the villain's progression over the course of a movie. So that was really cool to see. Kind of normally they're just like, they're the villain and they're powerful and you got to beat them and stuff. Where it's like, nah, this is a goofy guy. What are you worried about? Like, so yeah. Spot, very cool the way that he kind of progressed through the movie.
Yeah, that you took the words right out of my mouth there. I definitely loved to see a villain's progression. You're absolutely right. There's so many stories where it happens. It happens on both sides. It happens on the hero side, and it happens on the villain side as well. Here's a hero. He's already the hero. Not to get off topic, but with Halo, Master Chief, he gets dumped in there, and he's like, "This is Master Chief. He's done a bunch of great things. He's the hero. There you go." But
there you go. Have fun.
Have fun. He's already God mode. But it was really cool to see like this goofy guy go from goofy like breads falling out of his belly to I'm going to end you and just leaving. I really really enjoy that, and for me, like I do really enjoy the hero side of storylines, but as Nan will tell you and be able to vouch, I also really enjoy the villain side of it. I not saying anything against heroes, and I'm not trying to say I'm trying to go on the bad guy tangent here, but I do think that sometimes the villains have a very like intricate storyline that isn't always explored, or if it is explored, it's not explored to the depth that a lot of heroes get explored. So I'd like to see more, or I like seeing more in these movies going forward, and like Across the Spider-Verse, to show some of that development within the movie, so you kind of know this is what's happened, this is how we got here. We know the villain almost as much as we know the hero, because they've gotten about the same amount of time to develop their character.
with the exception of potentially the mystery hero. Now, starting out with the Vulture as the villain too, and I love the design that they use for, like, we're gonna pull him out of, like, Da Vinci era and his, like, wooden vulture suit. I was like, all right, that was a perfect introduction to being like, hey, the multiverse is messed up. You kind of saw this in, like, the live action things, like we've seen, like, you know, of course, the live action Spider-Man, where they're like, oh, here's all these Spider-Man villains from all the Spider-Man movies running around. Where this was like, okay, we got to see all the spider people in the first one go to the different universe and be glitching and having trouble, and now it's like, now villains are showing up, and, you know, clearly something's going on with the Spider-Verse here, or with the multiverse. So it was very cool to see that sort of, you know, big action to start things out with the movie, of, like, them catching the helicopter and really, like, kind of getting people invested, I felt like, in it. But I was, you know, it's cool to see even just, like, the subtle little heroes sprinkled in, like seeing the Vulture, as well as, you know, a little live action cameo of a villain as well. But I don't know. Before I get into that, what did you think about, like, Vulture and stuff? You know?
That was also a really funny thing. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't expecting a Da Vinci style artsy vulture to pop out of a Da Vinci dimension, and my fiance wasn't expecting it either, because she gave me a look like, what?
What is happening?
But, like, a good, like, holy, you know, like, and it just adds to the level of just surprise after surprise. Again, I think I went into the movie with, like, I don't think so I feel like my opinion on some things might be a little bit biased, because I love Spider-Man. I love the Spider-Man storyline and the Spider-Verse and all that. So I went into it with a little bit of bias of, like, that movie could have been absolute dog shit, and I would have enjoyed it every bit of the way, because it's a story that's very dear to my heart, right?
Yes.
Now, was it very well executed? Yes. Was it really well done? Absolutely, yes. It's almost like my love for it was multiplied by all the different aspects and all the different diverse things they did with the story. And that's the thing, is it's like, with animation, you have the power to do that. You have the power to bring so many different elements into a movie, like a Da Vinci vulture that you'd be like, how in the
how does that work? Yeah.
how would we ever do that live action? You can do it in animation. You just have to be willing to put in the time and spend the money.
Yeah.
So yeah, I loved it. I thought it was cool. I think it was a good way to kind of put everything together, and, like, it was a good start to the movie. And I think it also did a very good thing. It set up where it foreshadowed Miguel a little bit, and kind of his character, and kind of which direction he was going. So Dan knows exactly where I'm going with this, but there's towards the end of that fight scene with them, before the helicopter is coming up to, you know, shine the light on it, Miguel is about to take a bite out of the Vulture, and
takes his mask off, the fangs come out.
He is going to bite him. He is going to bite him, and it leaves you wondering, because you're like, why? That's not. He's trying to suppress him, not drink from him. So I'm gonna throw it right back at Dan and be like, what were your thoughts? We've had a little bit of a mini discussion about Miguel potentially not necessarily being who he claims to be, or kind of being another one of the bad guys in the story. So
yes. Right, he appeared as the bad guy. Oh, we're gonna catch, you know, Miles, and we're gonna do, you know, all the Spider-Man, get him. But we're referring to more of the vampire side, and they even made a comment, I remember, in the movie, of somebody referring to Miguel as a vampire. So it's like a known bit of information that they know, but it is that, like, in the actual comic, right? The Spider-Verse comic that they released and they came out with, there's a group of beings called the Inheritors. And there's one particular one called Morlun, Morlun, Morlun. And their whole thing is they are these vampire-like beings that drain the life force of specific animal totem characters, right? People that have these animal totems. In particular, this group targets the spider people that exist across the timelines of all the different spider verses out there, and they're basically draining and killing the spider people. There have been a few instances where some spider people have killed the inheritors and stuff like that, and that's like this whole cosmic fight of like, hey, these spider people can end your life, so you should kill the spider people. Oh yeah, that's a good idea, I'll do that. But that's where we've had this conversation of maybe Miguel is one of these inheritors, one of these beings that feed off of the animal totems of people, and specifically us seeing him pull out his fangs and do this against the vulture kind of makes me think that maybe he is in that sort of same group, like people like, right, the rhino, vulture, like these characters, as well as Spider-Man, right? These animal totem characters, Black Cat, all these characters in this world are in danger because of these beings that want to strain their life forces. So that's the discussion we've had, is we think that it is leading to that maybe he is that subtle villain, and they're gonna play on this like Prowler thing, and then it's gonna be a whole haha surprise, or maybe not. Maybe we're reading too much into it, and maybe it's gonna be nothing. But that's where my brain went to as soon as I saw the fangs come out, specifically versus the vulture. Like in the theaters, I was like, wait a minute, this reminds me of the actual comic and what actually happened with them hunting them down. But yeah.
Well, and interestingly enough too, you have a particular part in a scene where you see Miguel injecting himself with what appears to be like some sort of spider venom, or it's a green substance, and it's got like my memory is awful, but I think it might have had like a little spider symbol or whatever. But he's clearly injecting himself with something. So that further led me to believe that there was more going on to the story than Miguel was letting on.
Yeah.
I also, with my tinfoil hat again, I don't know. So there's a particular scene where he talks about how Miles was the first, like, he created the first issue that
he was the anomaly.
He was the first anomaly. But then he talks about traveling to, a universe where he wasn't supposed to be, and creating all these issues and stuff, and that's how he knows it doesn't work. So that also kind of, something about that story that just didn't add up for me. So it's like there's a lot of little things that just point to Miguel not being who he is. Now, we might be stretching really far by going the inheritors route, but something's not adding up. Something's just not adding up.
Yeah, something's not adding up. And that's the thing, right? The inheritors and Morlun, and if you want to read more about Spider-Punk and, the Superior Spider-Man and Miles Morales and, Scarlet Spider and all these amazing different characters, you can pick up the book, right? I picked up the trade back for it, and it is amazing. It has all that information. You can find out more stuff about it. So if you wanna invest more in the Spider-Verse stuff, check out the book, because it is cool. It's got some cool stuff in it. But yeah, again, we could be reading too much into it, but that's where our brains went when we saw it. I was really happy to see, shifting gears away from Miguel for a second, is when they were going in that 2099, the Spider facility, and they got to see Donald Glover dressed up as the Prowler in the live action stuff. And I was like, that is really cool, especially because the last time we saw Donald Glover playing a character in the MCU is in like one of the early Tom Holland Spider-Man stuff. He was like in a garage or something and got webbed to a car and stuff. And he, in that case, right, he specifically was like, oh, I've got, a nephew named Miles, and, said that in the MCU to Tom Holland's Spider-Man and stuff like that. So it was cool to see him in this, he's older, he's wearing the Prowler outfit thing, like it's like kind of building up towards a kind of cross connection with Across the Spider-Verse and the MCU, right? They're planting more and more seeds, it feels like, especially with the nods and the little subtle things that they had in the HQ of like, here are all these images of the canon events and things like that are taking place, of like, oh, here's Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, and here's when, Gwen Stacy dies from Andrew Garfield's one, and like, oh, here's these comic book images of it, of like, so it was very cool to see this like connection of media from comic book to live action to animation in the kind of Spider HQ. So I don't know. What do you think? Do you think there'll be a crossover that could come from this between the MCU and like across the Spider-Verse?
I feel like I think there has to be. Miguel makes a reference to the MCU's like the main story
Doctor Strange,
Doctor Strange and Tom Holland's Spider-Man, of like those that nerd and all those kids, and essentially like they pretty much almost broke the Spider-Verse, like in reality. So I think there's too much evidence to show that there isn't going to be some sort of cross at some point. There's too much going on. It just makes sense. I think with where that movie ended and kind of where Spider-Verse is going, it's going to pop up, even if it's just a mild reference. Who knows? It seems like too much effort for a bit.
Yes, right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot. It's not like it's super easy to animate a live human being into an animated movie and make it flow. That's a lot of effort.
That's a lot of effort, which actually reminded me of another little cameo thing, because I know you're a big fan of villains. There was a little bit of a Venom crossover there when the Spot was figuring out his powers, and he was zipping through, went to like the Lego world, went to the comic, and then he went into like the Venom Earth. I don't remember and keep track of what number all the Earths are, but basically the Earth where Venom exists, because he went into that convenience shop and stuff like that. So I thought that was a cool little just connecting all of the dots across the Spider movies that exist up to this point.
That was I love that scene when the Spot comes out of the hole and it's like, wait, you're not shocked by this? Dead face. Yeah. Nope. No, no reaction whatsoever. I love that. I think I stand by what I've said. I think that there's too much being shown for there not to be a crossover. One thing I will mention that I was kind of like thinking about as well, with Miguel essentially not being who we think he might be, is I know that his powers didn't come from a radioactive spike.
Correct.
He essentially injected himself with, like, he's 50% spider, 50% man, and that's kind of how his powers work. So there is a possibility that he was like going kind of spidery at that point. But my tinfoil hat goes back to what we had originally talked. So yeah, there's just so many different things in so many different directions. It just gets me excited to talk about it, but also to like see where the story's going to go and see like were we right or were we so far off that it's actually depressing.
Right. It's like, are they not going to use any of the inheritors? Are they not going to do it at all? Or is it like a setup? Hey, we're building it, and maybe after we're done telling Miles' story and getting through all this, there's this like subtle thing in the background that if we ever return to this world, it's there that we have more villains that we can pull from. Like, I don't know, it's hard to tell a good story in one movie, let alone across 3 movies like the Spider-Verse series is doing now.
Yeah, and actually that might even be a good so that might be a good transition or point to talk about Miles as a character. So the thing that's really interesting and that I really, really like is I wasn't how do I word this? So there was a lot. So when Miles Morales' character was first introduced, there was a lot of I don't want to say negative, but he wasn't received.
No, there was negativity.
There was a lot of negativity with Miles as Spider-Man. They're like, he can't be Spider-Man. He's not supposed to be Spider-Man. You can't do this, you can't do that.
Yeah.
I really, really like that in this movie. That's almost being addressed directly. Miguel tells them, you weren't supposed to be Spider-Man. You're not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be these things. And he says, no, I'm going to do my own thing. And challenges that very conception of you're not supposed to be here, you're not supposed to be this, and he challenges that canon again, quote unquote, the canon, when he saves the inspector and saying, just because that causes an issue in the quote unquote Spider-Verse and causes a tear doesn't mean that I'm supposed to just let him die. And the ideology of Spider-Man, or what it means to be Spider-Man or to be a Spider person, is very much within Miles, in this version of Miles. And I really, really love to see kind of like that, David versus Goliath story. He's up against the entire Spider-Verse, and he's not letting down. He's not letting it just happen and going on. And that's the essence of the character. And it's being captured very well in this film.
It is. I mean, and even in the first one, right? Like with the Stan Lee cameo of anybody can wear the mask and kind of thing. Like, they sat there and they've spelled it out for you guys. If you don't believe that Miles is Spider-Man, then there's something wrong with you. He's a great Spider-Man. But it's his growth and his progression has been really cool to see. Even when like Gwen first came back and they were like zipping around, and he just his ability to kind of try to keep up with her and not quite doing it, like bumping into cars or like these little things that he was doing when he's zipping around with her, like, oh, she's hanging upside down by her foot, so he tries to do it. He's doing pretty good. Like, he's learned how to do it, but it's more of like learning on the spot. I'm gonna learn while watching you kind of thing, which is something that we saw him do very well in the first movie, that he's still doing it in this, and it's just kind of like built into the way that they designed his character in it, which is cool to see that like growth and progression is happening like all the time for his character. I'm liking it. I like it.
And I think what I like too is he's very adaptive to what's going on around him, like you mentioned. He's kind of trying to figure it out, and I think that's the other thing that I find really compelling about his story and in this story being animated is, I think as you get older, you tend to forget a little bit about your youth and kind of your journey and things that have happened. And I think movies like this capture really the essence of, hey, here's a teenager trying to figure out who they are in the world, period, and here's another element, they have superpowers. So you combine those two elements together, and it makes it almost 10 times harder to kind of figure out where you stand in the world, because as you see, he's trying to live two separate lives, something that the character is known for since the beginning of its inception. Like, that's just been the thing. And there's different storylines of where people know, people don't know, he doesn't do it, people die because they know it. So his character is just so complex. And even the scene where Miles comes back to Earth, quote unquote Earth 42, and tells his mom, hey, I'm Spider-Man, and she's like, who's Spider-Man? What's a Spider-Man? That whole like
Spider-Man, yeah.
I like the getting away a little bit from the not necessarily secret identity, but the keeping your loved ones out of the loop to protect them. He cares about his mother, he cares about his father. He was ready to tell his mom and come clean because he wants her to know. He loves her. He wants that, like, to be able to connect with his parents on that level, not only as their kid, but also that other layer that they can also help with, potentially being as close as they are. I just love the amount of detail and psychology that goes into the movie, whether people are looking for it or not. It is seen, and it just naturally flows, but when you look at the next layer of it, it adds that next level. It makes it more complex.
It is. It reminds me, like, I've seen interviews with like Stan Lee, and he's talked about when he was working on Spider-Man and creating it and stuff, and it's like one of the main reasons Spider-Man became so popular when it was first came out was because he was that flawed character, right? You could see his struggles, the flaws, the everything is real, right? Relatable compared to like Batman and the billionaire aspect, and like it's I don't know. There's a lot that makes Spider-Man great, and you and I both are in agreement that it's our favorite of like the comic book related stuff, and that's the only like main comics that I collect now are Spider-Man ones. Like I used to collect just like the regulars, and now I have like trade backs because it was a lot of money to buy all those comics every single one. But that's good.
And it's funny because so again, going to the whole point, we love the Spider-Verse, and I personally love Venom, and one of the things about Venom too is Venom more or less becomes quote unquote a good guy after he fuses with Peter Parker, and like after they separate, the embryo's like, or the symbiote is like, oh crap, I kind of want to do good things but my way. So it's like it just goes to show like how much of impact that character has on the world, and as we're gonna talk about in future podcasts and story, that character, Spider-Man in general, and the Spider-Verse and Spider-People, it's so at the center of a lot of different storylines, not only because of their character, but because of how they interact with all the different characters. In Civil War and then its interactions. They'll be in in Secret Wars as well, and how important he is to that storyline. So there's just so many different elements and so much that make him such a great character because there's so much depth and just I don't know. I'm a fanboy.
Yeah, right. We're nerding out over how great Spider-Man is. No, but I think depth is a perfect way to describe that for his character. All right, so we're getting close to our hour. I was originally going into, I was like, maybe we'll talk about Spider-Verse for a little bit, then we'll talk about other MCU stuff, and nope. We'll save more MCU stuff for another episode because we just had so much to nerd out about Spider-Verse because it was so good. And if for some reason you're watching it and you and just wanted to listen to us talk about it and you haven't watched it yet, go watch it. It's amazing. You're not going to regret it. We are going to be doing some more episodes coming up. We're, of course, going to be talking about the rest of the MCU because there's new shows coming out. We haven't had a chance to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy yet, and of course James Gunn going to DC, and we'll nerd out about all those things in future episodes. But I think the next episode after this one is going to be our big Diablo episode because I've been obsessed with Diablo since it came out, as pretty much been everybody that we've talked to or we've seen on our friends list. Just kind of everybody's on Diablo. So we'll be doing some of that. But as we're getting to this kind of wrap up, let's get into that. What are you watching? What are you playing? What are you reading? What do you got going on? What stuff are you doing right now?
Well, I feel like you've done a really good transition to the end there. I've been playing Diablo.
Yeah.
I've been playing Diablo 4 nonstop. It's been such a great experience. We're gonna talk about it. We're gonna fill out an hour easy. And it might even be a two-parter. Like later on, maybe a couple episodes down, we'll talk about our further experience as the game progresses. It's still new. It mind-blowing. I think it was what was the statistic, Nan, that the first 4 days that the game released, worldwide, there was a total of millions of hours played, and it was a total of 10,000 years. In 4 days, the world played 10,000 years of Diablo. Now, to us, that statistic is awesome and funny. To the rest of the world, it's sad. I'm sorry, what? How many years were wasted doing what?
No. But it's one of those cool stats, though. I feel like that shows the impact and how many people are playing this game. Where some of the other stats that I don't know. Some of the other stats I've seen were just whatever. That doesn't really matter. But seeing that stat, seeing how many times the butchers killed people, those kind of stats I always laugh at and enjoy. So, all right, so you're all in on the Diablo. Is there anything else you're watching, you're reading, or is it just Diablo's on my brain?
Diablo really has been on the brain. I've more or less tried to catch up with a couple of shows. I still haven't finished Miss Marvel on on Disney Plus. I still haven't seen Secret Invasion, and then I also need to get caught up on Boba Fett. So I'm just trying to like make time when I'm not addicted to Diablo 4 to get caught up on those shows.
Cool. So like, I'm of course doing the Diablo grind as well. The other game is TFT is back for a new season, so I kind of got roped into that, trying to play and figure it out a little bit, and scatter a couple of games in between the Diablo grinds that we've got going on. Shows that we're watching, of course, you mentioned Secret Invasion. The first episode is out. Watched it tonight. I'm not gonna go into it. We'll save it for our later MCU episode. Because like it literally just came out, so I'm really trying not to spoil that one. Where Spider-Verse has been out for a month, so no excuses. And I got sucked into the rabbit hole thanks to Jaime's recommendation of Kim's Convenience. I'm like on season 4 now. Like I went deep into it. Like it's a very funny show. So if you're looking for a funny show, it's on Netflix right now. It's great.
It's so good. I'm gonna recommend it again. If you have not seen it, it's a Canadian show that is hilarious. It's very well done. Check it out. Just do us a favor. If you don't listen to anything else you say and you think I'm an idiot for everything else I've said, just listen to this one thing and just go see the first episode. That's all you need to watch.
Excellent. But that's going to do it for us for this episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. If you're listening to us here or watching us, depending on where you are, you can check out the podcast anywhere that podcasts are available. So iTunes, Spotify, all that kind of good stuff. But thanks for tuning in and listening, watching, and we'll see you guys next game.
And I stopped as well. Oh, I think. Wait, no. Okay, you'll have to splice that.